to win the Premier League. Manchester City dropped more points, of course, this weekend. What do? They drew against Spurs 2-2. Arsenal, of course, with a win against Leeds, sees their side now 6 points clear at the top of the table. We've talked at length, obviously, about the decision, the referees, maybe the first goal shouldn't have stood, but that is not an excuse as to why City were so bad once again in the second half. Mark Ogden is still with us. Mario joins us as well.
Mario, yes, happy Mario, but Oggy, not been nice to Oggy.
What? Right, okay.
Nah, he's got his grumpy Man United.
We'll talk about Manchester United a little bit later on.
Well, they can't defend, can they? Tottenham, that's the problem.
Well, City can't defend it.
Tottenham can't either.
But how do you explain what happened in this match? How can City... Look, I know we talked about defences and they've got bad fullbacks, but overall, how can you not create a chance in the second half after being so dominant in the opening 45 minutes?
Because Tottenham...
Who's that down to?
Because Tottenham was so pedestrian in the first 45. It was so easy for Man City. I've seen this from Tottenham before. I've seen this from Thomas Frank's side a lot. They have been rank rotten for games in the first half, and then they've had a scolding from the crowd, and they've came out and they've been better. Not always got a result, but they have been better. They've actually ran about and checked. They did it with Villa in the FA Cup. They couldn't have been much worse against Villa in the FA Cup. They got beat in the end, but second half they made a game of it. This was exactly the same. Man City did not like it and could not cope with it when Tottenham finally got their ginger up. When Tottenham finally started making some challenges. When Tottenham started pressing them. City couldn't handle it. And when you get at City and they lose their composure, they have to then rely on their defence and their stability. And they don't have that. They had it for the first 6 games of the season, and then it left. People said, "Oh, look at City's defence early in the season." And what do we say here? It's got no longevity. They don't handle it when people punch them in the nose, right? Bodo Glimt did it to them over there. So the reason they were so, in my opinion, the reason they were so comfortable in the first half is because they've got good players, and when you set off really good players and give every one of them 10 yards on the ball, they will just spray it around. But they couldn't do it in the second half because Tottenham finally woke up. And they made their own mistakes. And also, we can talk about, the Solanke goal, the 2 goals, certainly the first one. The second one, you got Nico O'Reilly, and it might have been Kusanov, I can't remember who, or Gay, or whoever it was. 2 of them hesitant, gone for the ball, and Conor Gallagher gets in, and he's quicker. Again, he's sharper.
This isn't a one-off. This isn't a second half where they've just haven't been able to find the gas pedal after being so dominant in the first half. We've seen this since the start of the year. Manchester City not turning up when they're needed, when they want to be in this title race, when the doors open slightly. Yet again, Manchester City drop points and handing it to Arsenal.
Yeah, I think, like what Craig already said, I think the first half they had Rodri and Silva were dealing with it. They kept on picking the ball up and buzzing around it. But when it comes to Man City, it's just that the consistency that they had before, that we always could bank on and say like, oh, they got it. It seems like now it's scrimbling, like it's dropping points at occasions where we normally don't see that happen to them. And that's why I think now, like even when you highlight, you highlighted, a number of draws and the games that you understand, when we expect them to overtake certain things, they don't. And I think also what was very important in this game, Thomas Frank knows that he's in trouble, you understand, in the sense of like, he might not say that to his team, but you can see that the way his team is playing. But the second half, one of the things that is really English is winning your second ball. And the way Gallagher won that ball was not only winning the ball, was also a kid that wants to prove a point. You come from Chelsea, you go to Spurs, you want to prove a point and say like, hey, listen guys, I'm here now, I want to win. And I want to prove to London that I am supposed to be here. So in that sense, I think Spurs reacted really well in the second half. And of course, the first goal changed the whole game, regardless if it was a foul.
Oggy, looking at this overall, Semenyo comes in, Gay comes in, obviously, to try and boost Manchester City's squad, to try and help their title race. We're not seeing that, obviously, at the moment. Where do we stand on Pep Guardiola and his future? Because is it that he's just run out of ideas, the players aren't listening to him? Where do we stand on this?
Well, I mean, have they run out of ideas? I mean, first of all, the Semenyo signing's been good because he scored quite a few goals and kept them competitive, really. I think what it is with Pep, I think obviously only Pep will know himself what he's going to do. He's contracted till the end of next season. I don't think anybody right now thinks he'll stay, but we've thought that 3 or 4 times over the last 5 or 6 years, and he always signs a contract. It feels different this time, but I think that's because it seems like there's a bigger rebuild, and whether Pep has the appetite for the rebuild. And they've signed Gay, they've signed Semenyo, but for me the midfield is the problem because they haven't got any midfield. Rodri, great player that he was, he's still struggling to overcome the cruciate injury. He's not as mobile or as effective as he was. And then who else have they got? Nico O'Reilly was playing there at the weekend, and he's a fullback. Then you've got Bernardo Silva, who, again, he's pretty much checking out. He's going to leave in the summer. And then beyond that, Reinders is average. They haven't got a player like a De Bruyne or a Yaya Toure or, the great players, the great midfielders that City have had under Pep Guardiola. They've no power. They've no legs. So Pep's probably looking at it thinking, no matter what I do, I can't get this midfield to work. Because as soon as somebody goes out that midfield, you mentioned Conor Gallagher, somebody that gets around them, they can't handle it. And he hasn't got the players to make a difference. So they can sign all the defenders and forwards they want. If they're not controlling the midfield, they're not going to win games. And that's why they've won one of the last 6, and that was against Wolves.
Yeah, but that's their problem, isn't it, Augie? I mean, is he working with his... Who's still there at the sporting directors? I know some of them, 1 or 2 left. Who's still there?
Well, Chiqui Begiristain left, so obviously Hugo Viana came from Sporting Lisbon, and it's Ferran Soriano who's the chief exec from Barcelona. So in terms of Pep's kind of team, Chiqui was the guy that he worked in tandem with to get players in. Hugo Viana, obviously Sporting have a different profile of players that they need to attract. He's come in, but obviously, Chiqui Begiristain was part of the group that brought in Nico last year, who hasn't been great. Brought in Kujanov, who hasn't been great. The signings over the last 18 months, 2 years, have been patchy. And that is the problem. Is we've seen it with all the great teams of the past, Man United, Liverpool. When you replace great players with less great players, sometimes average players, you have an effect. And City is suffering that right now. And, Pep's a genius, as we know, but if the players aren't up to it and the midfielders aren't up to it, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, what's going through the players' minds at the moment, Mario? Obviously, Oggy mentioned Bernardo Silva's checked out. Are players starting to think about their futures, what's going on, like Haaland?
Well, Bernardo Silva was brilliant in the first half. But again, that was because...
But if you've got a player that's leaving at the end of the season...
But that was because he was allowed to be given that space.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get into the mindset of these City players. Like, how much do they care, I suppose? They didn't turn up in the Manchester derby. They didn't turn up against Bodo Glimt. They didn't turn up in the second half yesterday. That has got to be a problem, isn't it, that needs addressing? And how much is that down to Pep? And how much of these players?
I'll go back to
out?
last year before the proverbial hit the fan, right? I remember a Carabao Cup game at Tottenham, actually. Do you remember?
When it was all smiles at the end.
They were losing. They were getting beat. It was near the end of the game. The camera cut to the bench, and there must have been some comedian in there because they were all laughing and smiling. And I think there is a question as a player, even if it's not foremost in your mind, subconsciously, if you've been as dominant as they were for a period in England, subconsciously when you know a manager maybe has lost, and that's understandable if indeed Guardiola has lost that bit of drive, like Klopp lost that energy at Liverpool, didn't have the energy, he admitted it. And Guardiola's been doing it at the top for longer. Day in, day out. And people might say, well, it's not, you're not digging a road or you're not, but it's a mental thing. And when players can sense that a manager might be coming to the end and that the team are not as strong and that things may be changing, subconsciously maybe you just lose, even if you lose 5 or 10%, and it's not because you're not trying, it's not because your attitude, it's just, things just change. If you lose even 5 or 10% at this kind of level, then your results drop. And maybe there is a case from both players and, Augie mentioned it, Rodri's had serious injury. They've got injuries to Guardiola and Diaz, and Stones has been permanently, it seems, on and off the treatment table for a couple of years now. These are experienced players. And these things were being camouflaged at the start of the season by Erling Haaland's form, by Haaland's goals.
Yeah.
And you can only camouflage it for so long unless he has the season of all seasons, which, you know, he's gone through a bit of a drier patch. And when he goes through that drier patch, it puts the pressure on the rest of the side. And when the rest of the side start to creak, whether it be the midfield, which hasn't quite got the legs, but that's their issue. Nico Gonzalez was 60 million. You know, Tijani Reinders was a top player at Milan. Maybe the people don't think he is in England, but he was... And I think he's a good box-to-box midfielder. I think you just have to find ways to use him correctly. But when then that puts pressure on the weakest part of the team, which under no doubt is the defence. Now you're looking at Donnarumma, who, by the way, has been excellent.
Yeah. That tells its own story.
Absolutely excellent. But for Donnarumma and Haaland's goals, they're in Liverpool's position.
Yes.
Not even in the top four.
See, this is the thing for me. Listen, I got the point about Guardiola maybe needing a break, but he had no problem taking that sabbatical after Barcelona. He had no problem taking a sabbatical after Bayern Munich. Why is he pushing himself through that this time around? That for me doesn't...
Because he doesn't, I think he doesn't, when they had this bad spell last year, and this is only my opinion, I might be wrong, I don't think he wanted to be seen to be walking away from a tricky situation. He's chucked the towel in. I think he wanted to make sure he could show people he came through that.
A fair point, but then you started touching it. Augie raised it, but you have Guardiola with his backroom staff, whoever it may have been, spending an awful lot of money to address some of these issues. You mentioned Reinders. Augie described him as an average player. Spent an awful lot of money on him. Marmoush, 12 months ago, spent an awful lot of money on him. Now, all of a sudden, these players who are highly sought after, it wasn't as though Pep was trying to pick a diamond in the rough here. People knew who these players were, knew their talents, knew how good they were. They spent the money to bring them in, and yet they simply aren't performing under Pep as anybody thought they would. So you have a lot of injuries to your back four, certainly, and you're taking a beating for it. But that is no excuse for the underperformance of Reinders, of Marmoush, of being unable to create a single opportunity in the second half against Spurs.
Yeah.
Erling Haaland or not, you cannot create a single opportunity in an entire 45 minutes. That is really poor showing in my opinion.
Mario, Craig mentioned it. Just take me back to the psyche of these players. Like, are there a 5% drop-off?
Yes, because I think, look, Pep have tweaked a lot of things, right? We highlighted the players that he brought in, but also the system that he played. You understand? Sometimes he plays, like even the right or the left back could be a midfielder and he puts them in. He always implements new things because the things that he implements, Arsenal is using it. Regarding if Chelsea was using it. The same kind of similarities because they were part of his background staff, but still, you see that he tweaked a lot of things and new things he came up with. But now it looks like, it almost looks like some of the teams have an answer to it. And the answer that is into it is that they know that he wants to control the tempo of the game. And they hold the discipline to him. When he was at Barcelona, similarities were happening. Okay, great time. You cannot compare it maybe to it. But then he comes to City, and what Craig said, I totally agree with it. I don't think he wants to walk away leaving the team. He's a real winner, and I think his pride is bigger than, just walking away from a team that is not performing the way he wants it to be. And because of that reason now, it's going to take him a lot more energy and power to tweak things and turn things around, because the way the players are performing right now, they dropped something. And what they dropped, he's there every day. He can see it, and he sees that the ones that he had prior to this were all the ones that wanted to be the champion, were going for it. I think these ones clearly want to be champions too, but they had the need and the anger and the discipline to go after it. And now it's just a little bit less than that.
A lot more on this on Extra Time, by the way, which, as always, you can check out on YouTube. Mario back with us to discuss that. And the Gab and Jules podcast. Oh, how can I forget that? That is available now.